So this is kind of it, guys. We've tried to do it with the ethereal, let's just give the information and wait for everybody to find it as they need it. But we're quickly moving from there. We are at the point in history where every single one of us in a history book at some time or another has looked back and said, why didn't anybody do anything? Why didn't they know? Why couldn't they see this coming? We're there. There's a change coming. There's two whole generations that have been cut off from the older generations that have no idea how to do things. They don't know how baking soda and vinegar react. They don't know how elements and systems everywhere work together to keep the universe in checks and balances and in balance. The earth sees the imbalance and it tries to take those steps to mitigate it. So the question then becomes, as things escalate, politically, culturally, just the atmosphere, the tension that exists, you have all of these people that work together to create the divide and the polarization and the severe dysfunction in an entire planet, in countries, in civilizations, in communities. And then the earth reacts and emergency is created, because in times of emergency, that is when the earth needs to remind people that we all pull together. The next 3 months, there's going to be fact-based, this is how things work, this is how things are done. That's where Yap Yap comes in. When there are questions of elemental functions and how shit works together, because baking soda and vinegar doesn't just apply to making science experiment volcanoes. That's the same science that is active in all of our cleaners. That's the same science that works in making most of our perishable goods and our breads. This is a science and elemental knowledge that exists as a way of helping the world continue and perpetuate. It's time that we all sort of get some reminders on how all that shit works. The other side to that is how all the harder stuff works, how the technology works, how technology is being used to keep old people siloed away so that the only forms of comfort they have is Fox News and their traditional methods of knowledge. Newspapers is a dying art, and the literal adaptation of the phrase adapt or die is where we are. So I'm going to try and help the older generations understand how to adapt, how to learn technology, how to use technology. It's time. So what do I mean by adapt or die? Through human evolution, the human body has had to adapt. Spleens and appendixes are completely voluntary and useless, really. We can have them removed and completely function as a normal human. Gallbladders can also be removed and you can function like a normal human as long as you can adapt whatever you eat. And again, adapt or die. So what does that mean as it's applied to times today? Well, both sides of the fence. You've got the older generations who are so adverse to technology and so adherent to the way things were that this gasp of this administration is very, very reminiscent of the last gasp of the greatest gen with Nixon in the 70s. I swear, Nixon starting in 73 undid all of the good everyone did between 45 and 73. So that's fantastic. We really spent the last 50-ish years kind of trying to recover from what Nixon did. And I would really, like, as someone who's 42 and lived through most of that recovery phase, I was really looking forward to my retirement being that cush, being the 25-year, we've all worked so hard. We're going to make the planet and our culture enjoyable. And we're going to let growth and expansion take the helm and lead. I was really looking forward to that. And I was more looking forward to me being able to sit back and not have to drive it. Unfortunately, that's not the life we live in. At 42, I'm now getting ready to go into, it's either my 7th or 8th financial crisis, like global financial crisis. At least my 2nd or 3rd worldwide, like, what the hell do we do next moment. And frankly, I'm tired of asking questions and having no one have an answer with any kind of systemic result. So again, what are we going to do about that? To address the adapt or die from both sides, we're going to address both sides of it, and we're going to address it at the same time. I've created all of the understanding technology over the last year of my life. This is in standard boomer friendly content so that they can download it. They can get the PDFs, they can see how to do it. As I receive feedback from that age group as to the information that I've provided, I am planning on creating screen tutorials of how things look, how things can be done. So for the next 3 months, we are going to inundate from Yap Yap and from the Humanity of STEM how we can learn that technology, how to use that technology, how to ask the questions about the things that you're hearing. Because if I hear one more boomer say, everything's great, this administration is fantastic, but then when information is provided, like the fact that military troops were deployed to LA without request by the governor or the mayor, so it's teaching boomers and the older generations how to use technology to see what's going on in real time and then how to ask questions about it so that you can find the actual source. Because if there's anything in my 42 years that the boomers and boomer generation has shoved down my throat obnoxiously is to cite my goddamn source. So if they could do the same thing with anything they're reading, that would be freaking fantastic. So then we're going to address the Gen Z. The Gen Z side and the Gen Alpha side, man, as the Zennial, which is right in between that Millennial and Gen X, I have got nobody to blame but my damn self. I got a cell phone at 16, and I can honestly say I've pretty much known where my cell phone is for the entire 26 years since. So the problem is that we have this technology, and we worked really hard at it, and we worked really hard at facilitating this technology to be in every goddamn person's hand. The problem is that we all assumed that our kids would get this technology and they would ask the technology the questions that we were asking when we wished we had the technology. Perfect example. Back in old person days, encyclopedias were buy one book at a time. Now, the really wealthy people and the friends from the affluent neighborhoods, they had encyclopedias that went all the way to Z. My dream as a kid was to have a library with an encyclopedia, a complete extensive encyclopedia, so that if there was anything I had a question about, I would have the ability of going to find it. I didn't have to go to a library. I wouldn't have to find a friend. I wouldn't have to be resourceful. I would just have it. So when I've built my entire life and my entire mentality is in around that idea and that concept of having information accessible. I handed my kids phones and expected them to ask the phone the questions I would have, which is great because that's what every parent does, except for the fact that they just asked the computer and the computer told it, and then the kids moved on to the next thing. There was no additional questions because that first question was asked and answered. The child asks a yes or no question to the computer or the phone or the electronic device, and that device provides a response. There's no need for additional questions. There's no real world experience for this child to jump to the next step. Okay, if I mix baking soda and vinegar together, there is a reaction that causes bubbles and gases to form. That's great to know, but unless you are physically working with baking soda and vinegar, you don't taste the combination. The result of baking soda and vinegar is CO2. It's the carbonation that's found in sodas, in beer, in all of the things. You don't know to ask that question. You don't know to connect that dot unless you're physically experiencing it. So every generation before technology had real life, real world experience with all of the things that we were learning. We had the questions, and then from those questions, we asked and had to find answers, whether it be through it learning on our own, asking experts, going to school, any of those avenues that we could to learn the answers to our questions. And we had to care enough to ask the questions to continue to find it. The long answer to how I'm going to help explain this stuff to Gen Z and Gen Alpha is to help them experience it. to give them the real world examples of how things work, to show them how these materials and elements combine to be of use. We as humans had to learn how all this shit works the hard way. Throughout the course of human history, we have done things to try and give future generations shortcuts and handouts. Every single generation. Nothing morphs from generation to generation without sacrifices of the prior generation to facilitate the growth of the generation that comes after. What we've run into is a situation where these generations are so divided because change happens so fast that there's no connection. So that's the third element of how to make these concepts understandable across all the generations so that both sides of the fence can adapt and we all don't die. Now, I've spent the last year trying to figure out how to do that. I've pushed out 500 pieces of content, all with mostly functional and informational value. I've tried to keep my face off the internet. I've tried to hide behind the science and the logic and the knowledge. I can't do that anymore. It's time we all figure out how to connect and how to work together and how to collaborate, because every single one of us has a role to play. Every person's role is just as vital as anyone else's. These channels are intended for those individuals who see opportunities for improvement and want to take them. It's my opinion that most of the world actually wants that the people with the loudest voices currently are just the exceptions. It is more important for someone to at least be providing the facts and sources of information as best we can.